She said, dancing? Okay, I didn't know what these was. Your mommy.
Good morning.
Hello.
Good morning.
So we have, I see Karen is on, and I see a cell phone, but I'm not sure who that is.
It's probably me. I'm going to rename myself. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. It's probably me, so I'm going to rename it.
Okay. There's someone else on with an iPhone.
Well,
Richard is just.
Yeah.
Richard just joined us.
Hello.
Good morning, Richard. How are you?
I'm good.
Hopefully you're enjoying the weekend.
Yeah, I spent some of the morning today going through some of these procedures and making some written notes about the different procedures that, you know, it takes time to go through all these things. So
It sure does.
yeah.
I'm going through them also.
Yeah, I mean, I initially read them, but now I'm kind of, you know, quoting specific things that I think are worthy of comment. And I've sort of only gone through really carefully about 3 of them.
One question to you. Did you get my agenda?
No.
Yeah, I emailed to everyone an agenda
Oh.
so that we have some uniformity to cover them. So just to cover a topic. So I don't know if you could check your mail. You should have gotten it yesterday.
Oh, let me see. I'm looking.
Good morning. Good morning, Marie.
Maybe it. Oh, here it is. It came in it was in my junk folder, which I didn't see.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How was your Halloween?
Quiet enough. And yours?
Very quiet. I didn't get one trick-or-treater.
Well, I'm always on the street where I don't get the kids to come across the street to me because I'm on a two-way street. So I don't get the kids to come across the street, and I don't have a sidewalk in front of my house. And that's good and bad. I don't have to make sure it's cleaned off when it snows,
Right.
but I don't get kids during the holidays, so that's interesting.
Yeah.
Very few.
Yeah. I bought $50 worth of candy and kept it all.
And the problem also with that is that not many people are going into the office. So people were taking their candy into the office. Now they have in many cases, no office to take the candy
I know.
to.
Otherwise, I could bring it somewhere.
So I think Janice, you're on the line with us still?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I can't figure out how to change my name in there.
Okay.
don't know why I can't. I usually can, but it's not letting me. But it says iPhone next to me. That's me.
Yeah, okay. Did you get the agenda that I sent out?
Yes.
Okay.
What document is the agenda? What is that?
Well, there are 3 documents there, and
Right.
the one that is, well, I'm trying to think. I forget how I said it. It should be a PDF. One is
Okay. Well,
yeah,
it says WPD P&P subcommittee agenda. Okay.
yes. Okay. Hopefully I labeled it correctly. So
Okay.
I
the
got
person,
it.
and Marie, did you get that?
Yes, I printed it
Okay,
out.
perfect.
Yep.
Yeah, so I just put this together just to try to keep us a little focused. If we need to change it, if you want to change it in any way, we could do that right at the beginning of this, or we can follow it as we can. It's not set in stone in any way, but just to help us kind of get through conversation. Any thoughts or in addition? We're missing one person. We're missing um,
Pat.
yes. So maybe the clock hit him right or didn't. Do we want to continue anyway?
Well, we could
Yeah.
get started. We may as well get started at least.
Okay. So I did send out to everyone. Marie had prepared the meeting minutes from the last meeting, and I think that ceremonially, if we went through this, especially since this is going to be turned over or kept as a recording in terms of our open policies and procedures, that being that Marie is keeping the meetings, that we recognize those meetings and the previous meetings in the current meeting, and then we kind of move from there. And just want to say, hopefully everybody had a chance to look at the meeting minutes, and if there's anything that they feel should change in what they said or were looking to communicate as per what Marie had put together, that we do that at the beginning of every meeting. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay, so I don't have any problems with the previous meetings, and I feel that they should be accepted. Does anyone else have any concerns or issues with the previous meeting minutes? Nope.
No.
Then we are good with that. Thank you, Marie, for preparing those.
Oh,
Uh, and so on the agenda, I have down that we have the review of the current set of policies that we've been handed. And I listed the current set of policies as they appeared in the email to me, which was the documents, was the mission statement we got, the body worn cameras document, field stop document, firearms document. And I'm referring to them as documents because in some cases they may not be policy. Personnel complaints document, response to resistance document, unabashed policing document, and video recording of interrogation document. That's what I received. I hope everybody else received the same thing.
well,
Yes.
Bernie, so I
Yes.
have this agenda that you sent out, but are all those things in the original documents that we got from Chief Castelli?
That's what I received, and that's what I presumed everybody else had received.
Okay, so that's what this outline is referring to.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. And only that. It doesn't refer to anything else other than that.
Okay.
Okay, and then in terms of other items within the agenda, I just wanted to put down to cover policy issues raised outside of this committee. Just a few things that I had heard, and I think that we should take note of those types of things, and they come up, that issues and concerns or things that we may seem to miss in some way or come to us outside of our own discovery. And then finally, policy management, some things that I felt were important that we take a look at. And then after that, if there's any next steps for the policy book, which I became aware of by speaking to the chief, and any subcommittee coordination issues that I thought was important. And then meeting, and then wanted to talk about meeting with the police department captains and any other issues for discussion. If there's anything that you feel that we should change, delete from this agenda, or add to it, as we go along, we can face that. Is that okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, good. So being that we all had our assignments to take a look at the policies and procedures, should we proceed through it in this way, that we look at, first, we were handed the mission statement. Does it make sense that we just look at that or mention it, or does anybody want to bring anything up with it? Do we need to say we accept it, or just bypass it if we feel it's not important to look at? Thoughts?
I didn't print that one out. I looked at it briefly. I think it was just like a paragraph or so, if I recall.
Yeah, I did also, and I didn't feel that it was important to linger on or say anything. Does anyone else have any thoughts about that? Janice?
I did not have any thoughts about that. I didn't even really look at it.
Okay. Yeah, I read it and didn't pay much attention to it. And Richard, any thoughts that you want to?
Yeah, it just says they should exhibit professionalism, integrity, and respect. Okay, we can't argue with that. So I mean, that's fine.
So
Right.
we just that's good. We reviewed that, and that's done. Now, so the next thing was body-worn cameras. How do we want to proceed through the conversation about that?
Okay, so I went through that today at Marie's suggestion, and I've emailed you some comments I have on that and a couple of the other procedures or policies, papers that we received. So you should have a document in your email, which should be called comments on current White Plains Police Department. Well, it actually says, it's mistyped WWPD, but it should be White Plains Police Department procedures on body-worn cameras. So there are a couple of things that I've noted there that have to do with, for example, when an officer records an incident that the officer reasonably believes will lead to a citizen complaint or civil action. This says the officer shall bring it to the attention of his or her supervisor. And so, the question is, well, maybe there should be a report of the existence of this recording to a civilian complaint review board, or if none is established, to the DA's office, the mayor, and the city council. So the current procedure just has, there's an incident where there's been a citizen complaint or is likely to be one. There's either a civil action or maybe a notice of claim has been filed, which is a prerequisite in at least a sue in New York State, or some other indication that there's going to be a civil litigation, as in a civil rights action brought against the officer or the White Plains Police Department. Maybe there should be, if the recording exists, it should be delivered to, civilian authorities as well as the supervisor. Right now, it's just internal. And so we should talk about, when these kinds of recordings can be turned over or should be turned over to the district attorney's office and, other civilian authorities.
Richard, did you send that to everybody?
Yeah.
When did you sent that this morning, though?
Yep.
Oh, okay. So I haven't even looked at my mail for today yet, and so I know I haven't received that. But did you so in all the stuff that you mentioned, did you just go through everything that you had written down, or is that, or is there much more to it?
The email that I sent you has a PDF document attached to it.
Okay.
That quotes the specific procedures. For example, officers shall not allow citizens to view the recordings unless authorized by a supervisor, In the event a citizen is allowed to view the recording, the officer will document the viewing. So, the question is whether civilian authorities should have access to these recordings. It also says that recordings shall not be released to the public are those involving open investigations, sex crimes victims, and juvenile arrests, and other exceptions as per, it says, the New York State FOIA law, which is actually the New York State FOIL law.
Yes.
And it says, so this, the question becomes, let's suppose that there is an incident where a police officer clubs a protester. Just say this happens. Well, when should a civilian complaint review board get a copy of that recording? When should the DA's office get a copy of that recording? When should the mayor and the city council get a copy of that recording? Right now, it's pretty much internal with the police.
Okay, so I understand where you're coming from. So I tend to look at things in terms of order of performance. So, and being an attorney, I presume that you do something similar. I understand what you're saying. Are we saying that piece of information needs to be included in this policy, or are we questioning the actual action of when that happens?
No, I'm saying that the policy should be that if there is reasonable cause to believe that there's going to be or has been a civilian complaint or civil action against the city and the police department, that notice that there's a body cam with this should be provided to civilian authorities, and it should be made available to civilian authorities, including a civilian complaint review board if we can get one. Right now it's all internal in the police department, and the civilian authorities would have to, get it. Presumably the police department would at some point deliver it to the DA's office, but it's, not clear when that would happen, particularly if there's no criminal prosecution arising out of the incident. So for example, let's suppose that the protester is clubbed, but he's not arrested. Well, then the DA's office is not prosecuting that person. And so, they don't have Brady obligations or discovery obligations to obtain and disclose that recording. Nonetheless, the district attorney's office, being independent of the police department, should have access to that recording to make a decision. And I'm not saying what the decision would be, but to at least be in a position to investigate whether there's any crime that was committed in the clubbing of the protester.
Does anyone have any thoughts behind that?
Well, I would add one thing. I think, first of all, that the DA's office is inherently biased in favor of the police, even though, they're supposed to be independent. And we also have the Corporation Counsel who should be investigating, any civil issues, civil rights violations, and so on. So I don't know if the DA's office is the proper, the proper channel. We do have a new DA coming in. I don't know if anything will change. I don't think drastically, but, I think there will be probably a little more openness to this kind of stuff, to these suggestions.
Well, yeah, this is why I'm saying that, you know, I'm including a civilian complaint review board as soon as we can get one.
Right.
And until that time, the mayor and the city council. So, you know, if the mayor and the city council have access to this body recording, then, you know, that makes it more public in the sense that a district attorney would be less likely to want to cover up for police misconduct. You know, if people can see, you know, particularly people in authority outside the police department and the DA's office can see what was done.
Okay. Janice, do you have any thoughts behind this?
I think Janice is muted.
No, she's not muted. I'm just wondering,
Oh,
is she hearing?
Okay, I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Now we can.
I'm sorry. I am trying to take notes on what Richard was saying. But Richard, can you tell me which part of the policy that I'm looking at, that the DA, that Chief Costelli sent me? Can you tell me which part of that are you referring to?
Okay, well, I have it quoted in my email, so let me
okay.
Let me get it up on the screen here.
Because I have about a 6-page document that he sent.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering
It's
which part of
It's
Huh?
8 pages. It's
Okay,
8
I have
pages.
those. I have those
Yeah,
8 pages, and I'm wondering which part of the document are you referring to?
All right. Well, the part that I'm going to find it in the document. Whenever an officer records an incident, should be reported to his supervisor. So let me find that.
Okay, let me look for that. Oh, okay. Oh no, that's not it.
I'll get it for you. Hold on.
Like
Okay, it's on page 4, paragraph
4.
10.
Yep.
Page 4, paragraph 10. Okay, hold on. Oh, okay. Whenever an officer records an incident or any portion of an incident which that officer reasonably believes will likely lead to a citizen complaint or civil action, the officer shall immediately bring it to the attention of his or her supervisor.
Exactly.
And you're suggesting that they also bring it to the council and the mayor? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, in other words, and the
Okay.
district attorney's office. In other words, what I'm saying is it's not the officer, but it's the White Plains Police Department or the supervisor who would be, you know, who we could recommend, you know, should bring this recording to the civilian authorities outside the police department, which would include the Westchester County District Attorney's Office, the mayor of the city of White Plains, and the city council of the city of White Plains.
Got you. That makes
Okay.
sense.
So I understand the spirit of what you're talking about here, Richard. I would like to think that any action of which there may be a complaint or it may be that the body camera video might have been in play based on the fact that there was a complaint made about this action that the police officer took, and therefore this is part of the discovery of what the circumstances were to that action. This would come along, or these recordings would come along with the actual complaint that's made to the city, and therefore, or made to the police department or some entity looking to look at that, i.e. the civilian review board. But what you're saying is that the video itself be available to all entities that need to place judgment, whether that be the civilian review board that we have, the mayor, or anyone else that needs to place consideration towards that. That's what you're actually saying, right? That the video is available for review. Am I not correct? Versus what I think you're saying is that the officer needs to bring that directly to the attention of these individuals. And the reason that I say that is that if the officer doesn't, then how do they discover this? So what I'm saying is that there needs to be some process and policy that says that this information that is created, that the officer has a responsibility to bring it to his advisor, but that whether the officer brings it to or whether the department brings it to, it needs to be available to whatever public entity that we're talking about would be in review of this information or this issue. Correct?
Oh, yeah, what I'm saying is it's not the individual officer who is going to send a copy of this.
We can't hear you, Richard.
You hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. It's not the individual officer who's going to send a copy. I'm not suggesting that that should happen. I'm
Okay.
saying the individual, the White Plains Police Department should be responsible for obtaining the video and sending the video to specific civilian authorities, not social media, not the newspapers, not, anything like that, but just to specific civilian authorities that, would include A, the district attorney's office of Westchester County, B, the mayor of the city of White Plains, C, the city council, presumably through the city council president, and D, a civilian complaint review board if one is established.
Okay.
Can I just
Yes.
interject
Go ahead.
right here? This also presupposes that an officer has actually videotaped the incident. How about all the incidents that don't get videotaped because there's a lot of discretion in the hands of each officer?
Yeah, but this is pertaining to the policy about the body-worn video camera. All right, so this is referring to the case in which the officer has an assigned body video, and actually here I don't like the language that they use, which speaks to a specific body-worn video camera of a particular type. They actually use a name, a vendor name, it looks like, which I think should be removed from this. So any video camera or any recording that is on the persons of the police officer involved in this incident should be available to any entity in the city that requires to review, or that would be required to review and make decisions about the incident itself. So
yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true, and I believe that. But I said these, they don't always. I mean, they turn it off. They can and do turn it off in instances. So the fact that we have recordings, do tell the story of those incidents that are recorded, but not the ones that are not recorded.
Well, the policy says they're not supposed to turn it off. And so if there were an incident where somebody, for example, a protester got clubbed and the cop turned off the video, that in itself would be a violation of these department policies and should likewise be reported to the same authorities, I would think.
And the other thing is, not every cop uses the video. It says that there are only ones who are trained in using this use it. And I'm trying to think. So, okay, only those officers who have completed a block of prescribed instruction are authorized to use the body visual equipment or system.
And I think that's exactly where some of the rub is also, because you may have an officer that they may claim is not authorized or has not been properly trained in the use of this. And then therefore, does this policy then state, or because of this policy, is there a loophole that says that even the video that is presented that may not be of an officer who has been authorized or duly trained to use this, is that then admissible to this process?
No, what I'm saying is that there are incidents that are not recorded because not every officer is required to wear these things.
And I'm just taking to it that it also, that as you stated, that this is for officers who have been trained
Yes.
in using
Yeah.
it. So you may have an officer who has the camera on that has not been trained in using this, and therefore that video should also be admissible to this process that Richard is talking about. So, because there may come a time in which you have an officer that they put out there that got the equipment, it may be on his or her uniform, it may even be active, but if they haven't been trained, and then it comes to question as to, is this video validly processed through policy and procedure, as it says, is it admissible to be seen as we're talking about? So actually, this should cover all officers, whether they are trained or not trained, and have this camera on. And I agree with you that it may be that the officer turns it off, and this should also address that they should never turn it off. As Richard said, I think in somewhere in here that it mentions that they should have it on. Am I not correct, Richard?
Yeah, that's right. It says specifically in here that they're not supposed to turn it off. And if they do, they have to make a recording as to why they're turning it off. I think it says that.
Yes. Yes, it does. It does.
Okay, so it is not acceptable that an officer would have the device on and not have it recording. Now, but what is not covered in here is that there are officers who may not be trained who have this device on. Does the information still get processed in the same way?
Well, it doesn't address that.
But it should.
Well,
That's
I
what
don't
I'm
know of
saying.
any circumstance where that would actually happen, because they have to get these things directly from the PD, I would imagine, when they go out. So I don't know how, but look, even if they did, if they had that, or even like civilian video, cell phone video, I mean, any video really should be discoverable or should be turned in to either a supervisor. I mean, I would say first a supervisor and then to, complaint board or the council and so on.
And I agree with you, but is that language also then outside of the scope of this policy? Because this policy points directly to the use of body-worn camera systems, right? And in that case, that may not be a body-worn camera system. There needs to be a policy that addresses all use of video within the scope of the use of the officer's interaction with someone. And so this policy sits, Richard, I think, is right in terms of us being clear about that it gets distributed to those beyond the police department. I don't know how we, within this policy, state as to which time that is. That may have to be within another policy, but all video that's used or that may have been gathered in the transmission of an interaction or altercation in some way, that then becomes a vehicle to describe the complaint or a complaint, is to be made available to all parties that need to discover that, and that is parties beyond the police department, the DA, the mayor's office, and any civilian complaint review board that exists in any form or fashion.
Right.
Correct?
Yes. But now here's another piece, like on the third, I think it's the third page, number 7. A lot of these incidents are recorded. I mean, they say most of them are recorded at the discretion of the officer. So that leaves a lot of space there. If an officer doesn't think it's significant, and look, in some incidents, as we know, start out harmless enough and then, turn into something a lot more. So, I mean, I think there's too much discretion given to the police. Maybe they should be videotaping any civilian contact. I'm not really sure.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. But I do have question to that, and it's only because of issues where I've seen either there's an issue where an officer may be at the scene dealing with an incident where someone may be physically exposed, or a youth may be physically exposed, or in the incident of interacting with a youth, and then therefore that image or that likeness of that person is kept on video, and may even be sent around, as we're saying now, that this can be not only used internally by police, but it may get out to other sources in other hands outside of the police department. And that's where I think that the officer needs to have some discretion as to how they're using those body-worn video cameras.
I agree that I think they should have them on at all times. I did see something that said, well, not during like maybe a domestic dispute or child abuse and sexual assaults. At those times, I can agree that, you know, filming might not be the best decision. But every other case, I think we're giving them too much discretion, too much, you know, it's up to them to decide. And I think
I
that could be
agree.
a problem.
I agree.
I think
Okay.
that could be a problem. I think that a lot of these policies that I have a problem with, it uses terms like what the officer believes to be reasonable. I have a problem with that word reasonable to an officer, because there's just too much, you know, leeway with that. I mean, pretty much they can be given, they can get out of certain situations by just saying, well, it was reasonable to them,
Right,
or
right.
it was at their discretion. Those are the kind of words that I have a problem with, and I don't know if there's anything we can do about it. But when you say that it's the police officer at his discretion, that bothers me.
I agree. And the one thing I would say is maybe right now, we don't get too hung up on this. I mean, we have a whole 2 pages of things to go through. So maybe what we could do, go through each of these and write down like our main issue with them. Like for instance, the body cameras. 1, they need to be made more public. 2, there needs to be less discretion in the hands of police. So those would be our main points. We don't necessarily have to decide right now exactly how to fix those problems, but maybe at least identify them.
So that's a very good point. I think that in order to allow us to go through these policies and somewhat make some sense of them, we need to have some agreed upon method as to how we are going to address the topic that we feel is important. And so one of the things I'd like to recommend is, as we're looking at the framework of what we're doing, is that we can, I think, as a group, discuss what needs to go in here, but as what Richard has done, if we read through these individually and we come up with points of concern for us, that we actually write those points of concerns down, and then we can put those into a group categorizing that particular policy. These are the issues that we feel are outstanding for each of the policies that we have read through. This is the area or section that those issues arise from. This is what we feel that should be done by that, and somewhat have a template to that. I think I can create a template that allows us to say, this is the policy, this is the section that it's in, this is the wording that is there, and this is what it addressed, and this is what we believe it should say, or how it should be amended. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think it does. I mean, without having to go through, you know, every single detail that we want, that we want done. I think we should just, zero in on the issues that we want to highlight, the main issues with each of these things, like the cameras, the field stops, the firearms, and so on.
Richard, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is what I've attempted to do with some of these things.
Right, right.
Uh,
And I think that we can each do that. If we had some format that we were looking at, then we'd be all able to see those areas that we feel we'll address. I know that I can put together a template that will allow us to mark off the policy, the section that it's in, or the page that it's on, the issue that it's supposed to address as per what its title or what its heading is, what the statement is made, and then how we think it should be addressed or changed or amended. And we could each make that, we can go through that process for each of the policies that we have. I think it makes it a little easier for us to address the policies in general. And so we should continue to go through this, and this what we're doing now, but this framework allows us to say, okay, this is what we're looking at.
Okay.
The-
So can we agree that the problems that we see with the body cameras, can we maybe agree on what we really want to hone in on?
I
Anybody?
can, based on the language that Richard has given us, I think I'd need to give it another pass just to point to some other topics that are within the language. For example, I don't feel that the particular name of a product or body camera product makes sense to be in a policy. I think that that's a mistake because at any given time that they need to change that, it means that they got to rework the policy for some reason because maybe the device operates differently.
I
So
mean, what the policy is saying, Bernie, is this is the camera that we are using, and you know, the officers are required to use that camera and not some other camera. I mean,
and I agree, but what that points to is that later on, the training, because it also states that the officer has to be properly trained in using this particular device. Not all devices operate the same way, and so therefore, if I'm looking at a particular name, it's the difference between using a Mac and using a PC. They're both computers, but they operate differently, and I have to be trained a little differently as to how to use them. So that's why I'm pointing to this issue that the name makes a difference in terms of what we're saying. So I would like for that name to be removed and just use the name or the generic name of body camera instead of a particular name.
Or maybe they can say something like the name of the camera that they are using now, but put some kind of clause in there or whatever camera we are using at that particular time.
I think it requires that then they keep going back to making changes to the policy. This allows us to take into consideration that it could be any body camera that's used instead of having to keep going back to change it. So I think that the term any body camera, no matter what it is, any body camera that they use, this should apply to.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair enough. We could say, you know, currently in use, their standard one is this Axon, but whatever in the future, you know, is adopted. You know, I think that's right. We could say any kind of body camera, but remember, the cops want to videotape less, not more. So
I think that that's part of their current psychology. I'd like to believe that we can encourage them that it's to their benefit to do more.
we could try. We could try. So this is what I'm gonna write down as far as our main recommendations for the cameras is that the name of the camera is not relevant, that this should apply to any videotape, including unofficial. I think if a civilian is standing by and taping this, and then
but let me back up for a minute. I just heard what you said. Because this policy is specifically about body worn cameras, I think when you start to say any civilian produced camera, it's beyond the scope of this policy. I think that we need to have a policy that covers all video that may,
Yes.
yeah. So I think that we should apply ourselves just to the policy of the body worn camera in this instance.
Okay. All right, and then also, if we decide that we want to make less discretion or give less discretion to each of the officers, I think that should be put in there somehow. That an officer maybe should, if he has this camera, should tape everything. Should any encounter, any civilian encounter.
And I agree with you there. I think that once again, that is that fundamental thought, however, it goes beyond the use of the body worn camera. And if I'm not correct, Janice, that's it in general, not only in the use of the camera that they have the discretion to turn the camera off, but the feel that I'm getting from what you say, Janice, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the officers are given this ability to make a judgment based on whatever they feel they want to make the judgment on, that they can escape from having made the wrong decision or the taking the wrong action by just saying that, oh, it was of my discretion, or I felt that it was because I made that judgment. Am I correct, Janice?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think they're given too much the option to, you know, be able to say, well, you know, I thought, I felt, you know, and to me, those are not really facts, they're feelings, and it bothers me. So, yeah.
And I think that from that point of view, that needs to be a greater policy that then feeds into this policy as to how the officers use their discretion or discretionary thoughts or languages or actions based on
Facts
everything,
and not,
many other things that they do.
Yeah.
And it should feed into exactly this policy, as you're right. Would you say that, Richard? Would you say that?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. And so one of the things that came out of us just looking at this is that there's this over whether this is a policy or not, it needs to be that deals with the discretionary actions of a police officer, and we need to address that somehow.
Right.
Yes. So I mean, I think we should move on to the next one.
Yes.
Unless we have anything more to say about body cameras. You know, because if we concentrate, if we talk about just that, then our whole meeting is going to be body cameras, and we're not going to be able to get to the other stuff.
I agree. So the next one is field stops.
Okay. And Richard did have a lot of good points here.
Can you give me a second here? I'm doing.
Oh, and I'm sorry, you know what? I'm just going to add one thing about the body-worn cameras. Because
Yes.
I highlighted it. It does say that evidence that this downloaded data should be held for a minimum of 6 months. I think it should be more than 6 months.
Does it say a minimum of 6 months?
That's what it says. If you go down, if you go to tagging, which is about page 5 maybe, or no, 7.
Okay. I got it.
Okay, so there it tells you how long that they keep these things for.
Right.
I agree. And once again, I think that that's part of a policy that should be made about all video information. That there needs to be an overwhelming policy that then feeds into this policy as to what the process and procedure for managing video information. Whether it be from the body camera or somebody taking a picture that they got a copy of, or someone taking cell phone video, or in the interrogation room, which we get to later on, it's the same language that
Right.
exists in that, and there should be some process and procedure that's documented that is part of policy as to how they handle video.
Right. Okay. So then field stops.
Okay, so let me just say that I read this, and I think that the purpose of this field stops manual is to tell cops, when they can stop people and search them. And I think that it is wrong in some regards. For example, where it says that they can do a forcible stop, not just limited to when an officer has reasonable suspicion that a person has committed a crime, has committed, is committing, or is about to commit a crime, which is, to those of us who are attorneys, the well-known DeBoer standard. And it adds something: when an officer reasonably suspects criminal behavior exists, which can be based on past articulated experiences. I mean, that is just wrong. That's like, well, I
Absolutely.
know he's a bad guy.
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah, because the issue of past articulated experience could be anywhere back to their childhood.
True.
Right.
Well, no, like Janice says, they say, "Oh, I've arrested this guy in the past. I know he's,
Right,
I know
right.
he's a dealer.
Yeah.
I know he's whatever."
Yes.
Right. So that's wrong. And it also says that when they do a car stop, it says if the occupant has to get his ID from the glove box, the officer may first inspect that area for weapons. And unless the police officer has a reasonable suspicion that this person is armed or dangerous,
They're
he
not
can't
supposed to
search
look in
the
the
car.
glove box, right? Yeah.
Yeah. They're not,
Yeah.
if they do have reasonable suspicion that the person is armed and dangerous, well, yes, they have, they could do that. But, it's really, and I put some citations, some legal research that I did this morning into this PDF that I just sent you this morning. But, those two policies that, I think are objectionable are, more in line with, what, the kind of training that we think that police officers should have, that should be in line with what the law of the state of New York is, as opposed to directly relating to, unauthorized use of force or something. But it does have to do with, sort of stop and frisk policies that could be violative of people's Fourth Amendment rights.
Can I
Okay.
just touch on something in terms of our processing through these policies that may help us a bit? And I think that Richard, you kind of hit on something for me. As we look at the policies, does it make sense that, one, we look at their definition of what this policy is supposed to cover, and maybe if we had that read aloud to us, then we can then point to the points within the policy that we see that we feel should be amended or changed in some way? Does that, I think it would help me in this case. Do you understand? Does everybody understand what I mean? That so as we start to look at the policy, for example, the field stops, they have a marking on here which says 12100 general, which means that I think that this is the general description of what this policy is supposed to cover. If we go through each of our, if we look at all of the policies that we get, and we know that there's supposed to be a general description of what that policy covers, if we read that, it'll best help us then hear the point, for example, some of the points that Richard, you're making as to how we should identify this policy as important, not important, or needs to be modified. It would help me. Hopefully, do you understand what I'm saying, Janice?
Yeah, I understand. I don't know if it's necessary, but if it will make you clear things up for you, then why not?
Yeah, I think
I
that it
mean,
would, just so we all know that we're hearing and read the same thing. Sometimes we may point to different things within the policy, and we're going through so much detail and so much information that just to give us a sync point on exactly what we're talking about here would be great. So as we look at the field policy, the field stop policy is a field reviews are an important crime fighting tool as they lead to catching criminals in the act of intelligence gathering, and preventing crime by sending a clear signal to potential offenders that police are watching them.
Yeah.
I start to then have problems with the policy itself. And that's why I'm saying, do you understand what I'm saying, Marie?
See, a lot of these things don't really have like a basis in actual constitutional law, like Richard was saying. Like forcible stop, that phrase forcible stop, it's not really something that's like used like in a court of law, for instance, if you were to have a hearing with a cop. I don't really know what a forcible stop means as opposed to just a regular stop. I mean, when I think of force, I think of either, a gun involved, a weapon involved, handcuffs. But to just stop and interview somebody, I don't know how that's forcible. And it leaves a lot of questions here as far as like definitions and what they mean by, requests for information. Like what information, are you talking about? Like you said, catching criminals in the act of what? Intelligence gathering, preventing crime by sending a clear signal. Well, the cops aren't there to prevent crime necessarily, but they're there to, I guess, stop crime or
Follow up on crime. Yeah.
I'm not really sure. I think a lot of this is vague. And the fact that it's only 2.5 pages long reinforces that for me. When there's like 7 pages on body cameras, but only 2 pages on field stops, which is equally important.
Can I say?
Yes, of course. So.
Well, I didn't like the word reasonable suspicion on there again. I just have a problem with that word. And then I also have an issue with at the bottom of the page where it says
What
facts.
page? At the bottom of what page?
The first page, the page with the general information that you were just reading.
Okay, so at the bottom of the first page, can you give us an example of which?
Under C must have articulated facts such as, but underneath that it also.
Can you read through that for me so I'm clear as to exactly what you're pointing to?
Okay, so I'm going to read the one that I'm talking about. The one that I'm
Yes,
talking about, it says facts that can help establish reasonable suspicion are. And those facts I have a problem with because I have a problem with number 3. Suspects' reaction to police presence. In parentheses, they had the word nervousness. Yes. I don't know what Black person isn't nervous when a police officer pulls up behind them. I don't know what Black person, even innocent Black people, which we usually are, when we get pulled over by a police officer, we tend to be very nervous. And if they're going to use that as reasonable suspicion, then Black people are in trouble. We're all nervous.
But we're already in trouble.
We're already in trouble. Who's not? We have all heard about what's going on all across the country. To put that in there as to be able to use that as a reason to establish suspicion is, I don't know what the right way to phrase it is, but we're already suspicious. I mean,
no, look, you're absolutely right. If you look way down on the bottom, these policies and procedures were adopted in 2006, it looks like.
Okay, right.
That's 14 years old.
Which is
Okay.
another point that I want to make about
Mhm.
process and procedure within looking at these documents. I think that we need to make sure as we go forward that I'm making a recommendation that we should see at the top of the policy the date that it was enacted. And that should be very clear to us so that we can, because as I see, some of these policies took place back in 1979, 1997,
Yeah.
which, we're over 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
and I'm quite sure that one of the things that I'm going to ask for and ask the group to co-sign behind is that we get a list of, it would be great to have the book of policies, which I don't think we're going to get. However, I do think that we can get the table of contents for all of the policies. And therefore, not knowing if any of these policies are so old that they really don't make sense, but yet the department is still using them to
Correct.
qualify their actions. So
Look,
we
maybe
need,
that's one of our recommendations. Ultimately, is to have the police update their policies, revise their policies.
I
I
think
think
that that's our overall recommendation. And as we've just stated from looking at the first two items, absolutely they have to update their policies.
Right.
There's no question about it. That needs to be our premise of the premise of this group is to recommend that they update policies, right? And this as a structural issue for how the policies even exist needs to be there, that the date and time that the policy was enacted is important.
Correct.
And to Richard's point, that we also make sure that the enactment of these policies is not just something that the department internally has done, but that is something that has been approved by the city council and the mayor.
Yes,
Anyway, let me
absolutely.
get off of my soapbox and let you go back to responding to the policy that we're talking about. So Janice,
yeah.
you were saying that this is how do we improve that language then?
Well, we got two attorneys on the team, so maybe they can
I
help
mean,
because
I would just
I'm not
take it
sure.
out. Right. I
Mhm.
mean,
I
I would
mean,
just eliminate that as a factor, in deciding whether or not to stop somebody. The fact that they're nervous, these things are all beyond what's required of, under the law.
yeah,
Um,
I'm thinking things should be, suspicion should be based on facts and not feelings and not, it just seems to be all wrong to me. And it doesn't, and it seems to be all wrong, and it's usually wrongly applied to Black people. And that's upsetting to me. I'm pretty sure that if Richard or Marie get stopped by the police, they're not going to be thinking this could end up deadly. I might not make it home. Whereas I get stopped, I'm very nervous. So it just doesn't seem fair to have an officer to say, well, you look nervous to me. Why what are you hiding? Like, what's wrong? It just doesn't seem like it should be in there.
right. Look,
Yeah.
I
So
agree.
let me give you, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So let me just give you a little background in this area of law. So what has happened is that in determining whether there's reasonable suspicion to believe someone has committed, is committing, or is about to commit a crime, and whether they then, in addition, are armed and dangerous, or there's reasonable suspicion to believe they may be armed and dangerous, the courts have found that it's the question of whether the officer objectively believes that the individual presents these armed and dangerous factors, and they can take into account the so-called totality of circumstances. And the officers have become very good at saying, well, the person turned away from me, and we call that blading, or the person averted his eyes from me as he was driving, or the person looked at me when he was driving, or the children who were sitting in the car were mechanically waving at me, or everyone was averting. They can have it every single way, because what happens is that a judge at a suppression hearing listens to the totality of the circumstances and is determining, based on the fact that the police officer searched and found contraband, which is why we're having the hearing in the first place, whether to suppress this evidence. And so the
Right.
police officers use this as a part of their training material to say, well, you can just say that the guy looked nervous. And that's a factor that the judge can, take into account. He moved his hand in the general direction of his waistband, or something like that. And all of a sudden that becomes a BS factor in support of, the search. And so that's why they have this nervousness thing in there. And we can recommend that it be taken out, but they're just picking up on what the case law permits.
Okay, so, but if we recommend that they're taken out of this document, it doesn't mean that it's going to stop the operation from happening in that way, because it just then becomes a question as to whether the officer used this procedural, let's call it a loophole right now, but it doesn't stop the officer from, it's not going to stop them from doing it. We're only making the statement that within the policy that this is something that should not be considered. And I understand where you're coming from. And everything that we're doing is based on what the policy has in it and how we may make recommendation to amend or change or delete that policy. So I can take into consideration the case law, and I understand what they're doing actively. I know that I may not be able to change that because of case law itself, as you're saying, Richard. But in terms of what we see down on paper here, we can make recommendations for changing here.
Right. And let me just jump in. Richard had a good point. He said, reasonable suspicion can be based on the totality of the circumstances, is based on that. However, when you read this stuff, and especially that last paragraph, facts that can help establish reasonable suspicion.
Can you point to where that last paragraph is for me? Because I get lost unless I see.
Okay, so at the bottom of the page, where it says
page
facts,
what?
under
First
field
page?
stops, the page that says
Okay.
field stops.
Okay, and the first page, there are 3 pages for field stop.
Right, the first page and all the way at the bottom.
Okay.
Okay, see, facts that can help establish reasonable suspicion. Okay, and now it says time of day, suspect's reaction, nervousness. That paragraph makes it seem like any one of those facts can be used when, like Richard said, it really is, it has to be the totality of the circumstances. It can't be just like the time of day, for instance, okay?
Right.
For the suspect's, unusual time of day. So it does not really say that all of these things, put together and it says must have articulated facts. Well, this all needs to be more specific. That reasonable suspicion, and we can get it directly from the case law or the penal code. But basically said each of this whole paragraph makes it seem like any one of these alone can result in a stop, which is not true.
But I think that, as Janice says, it is true, because any one of these things have been what are what Black people and Janice now
I understand that. That's why what I'm saying is that this has to be more specific.
Yes.
So that cops aren't just relying upon, nervousness or the time of day.
Yes.
Excuse me.
Marie, can I ask you what you mean? Because I don't understand when you say the totality. What do you mean?
Well, okay, so reasonable suspicion, and Richard can, jump in anytime, but reasonable suspicion, it says, has been described as, and reasonable suspicion is not probable cause to make an arrest. It's a reason to stop somebody to further inquire. But when you look at all these factors, it seems as if any one of these can be used. like you say, if somebody's nervous, I have a reasonable suspicion to stop and ask them questions. No, like Richard said, it has to be, that could be one factor. Like if you say, well, he was nervous and it looked like he had a bulge under his jacket, and I had like some confidential 911 call or unidentified. So all those factors together. But like I said, this makes it seem like any one of these things would suffice.
Okay. And you're saying that that's not the case. It has to be more than just.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
Right. So the case law says it can't be, quote, a hunch, whim, or a
Right.
guess.
Okay.
So I think that these policies and procedures really need to be based more upon the law than upon what they've written here.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think we're going to run into that for everything that we read here, especially for those things that are more out of date, like this one, which says new 906,
Yeah,
which is
exactly.
not new.
Exactly. 14 years old.
Yeah, 14 years old.
I
And
wonder
it's,
if we have the latest one, or if there is another one that he didn't give us. I wonder if this
well,
is the latest.
which is why we need the table of contents to be able to look at to see if there are policies that may even supersede this policy. We should see that in the table of contents. And if they're not able to produce a table of contents, it means that there is no real amalgamation of the policies as they exist, and there needs to be one. Which then our recommendation needs to be that they need to develop a set of capsulated policies that are put into one book, so that their policies and procedures can be followed by any of the officers that it refers to. And if that's not the case, we have a problem. Houston, we have a problem.
Yes.
Okay, so I think that we've gone through the second policy. Do we want to move on to the third, which is actually firearms?
We can. I just want to add one more thing quickly. So
Sure.
this is another thing that goes back to the reasonable suspicion. It says reasonably suspect that someone has about to commit a felony or penal law misdemeanor. Then in parentheses, it says not a violation. And then you turn the page. You turn the page and it says useful laws to investigate: littering, open container, trespassing. None of those are felonies or misdemeanors.
Okay, so
Hooting and hollering.
Once again, can you help me, Marie, understand where you refer to that first set of language on page 1, I presume?
Okay, so the first
is it
page
under forcible stops, or is it, yeah?
Yes, under forcible stops.
What number?
Number 2.
Okay.
Reasonable suspicion is described as suspecting that someone has committed, is committing, or about to commit a felony or misdemeanor. And then it says not a violation, okay? And then you turn over to the next page, the third page, the last paragraph, which
under D?
It says under 12105, useful laws to investigate.
Okay, that's on the third page.
On the third page.
Yes.
And then it has a list of city ordinance violations. Now,
yes.
My question is, like, where does this come into play? Are they saying that a violation of any of these city ordinances can lead to reasonable suspicion that a crime, has been or is about to be committed? That because somebody's on a skateboard or, has an open container? So I think that's another area that that should be a little more, specified. Like, what do they mean by these things?
Yeah, the city ordinance. This is one of the things that I had put down in my list of things that we need to understand that they have in place, which is I had put down on here that we need to have what are the notations to the policies and procedures, which I have seen come up a lot in there. The formal codes that they refer to come up a lot in the policies. Are there any city statutes that referred to within the policies that are outside of what the police have recommended, but are still city statutes, as well as ordinance? Because I know that there's an ordinance that says that you can't turn on the leaf blower at a certain time of the day, and if you do, that's a violation that you can receive a summons or a ticket for.
Right, but
And then
there's no reasonable suspicion for a crime.
yes, but in the process of that, if I went to, and this is what happens in my case. So I have a person who's Hispanic who's blowing leaves on the lawn because that's the job he's been given. It's been done at the wrong time. The police officer comes up to that person and says, "You're not supposed to do this. And by the way, let me see your information as to who you are." That person then becomes nervous and suspicious. Then that officer is then starting to say, "Okay, you look nervous to me, or something's wrong with you." So I'm now looking to look at this as an issue of a field stop
Well, exactly, and
based on
that's why right.
based on that officer's judgment, just as Janet is saying. That then is ties that person into this being a field stop. So that's
Right. And it
an
shouldn't be.
issue.
The bottom line is it shouldn't be. That's not the law.
Right.
So, but
I
so
have
that
to
was my,
apologize. I have to hang up now. I got to do something else.
Okay, Richard, I'm going to put together that that form in which we could put down for each of the policies that we see here. The other thing, so that Richard, before you go, what I'm asking for the group to do is I had asked the police department if they could give us 2 sessions in which we could meet their captains to go through what each department does. I've sent everyone what I got from the police department was their department breakdown and who it rolls up to in terms of responsibility. I'd like for them to present to us who those individuals are and what they do, so that we can see where the policies intersect with that particular department. There is a particular department that deals just with policies and procedures, and we should meet that captain as to how and understand how he does his job at putting these together or making sure that they're maintained. I'm asking if the group would allow me to go ahead and set those meetings up. I'll get from you what dates and times you may have available and see that we are all able to attend those presentation sessions.
Okay.
Okay. And so that was it for it, Richard. I just wanted to touch base on that.
Okay.
I
Well,
know you had to go.
I promised to work more on this, but that's what I can do today.
Understood.
Okay. Thanks.
Can I say something?
Sure, Janice.
Bernie, did you say there's a specific person in the police department that works on policies and procedures?
Yeah, if you look at I sent you an org chart. I sent everybody an org chart. In that org chart, they have down a box, and in that box is a particular captain who's responsible for policies and procedures. I actually have his name, right? And so I think it's important that we get in front of. Well, he's important to talk to. I also have his name. I met him through the walkthrough. But I think it's important for us to see all these captains and understand how the policies work in their department, because there are people who just deal with training. There are people who just deal with mental health. There are people who deal with field investigation and field management. And there's people who deal just with video. their managers just for these areas. So understanding what these areas are, I think will help us also better understand the policies and what we're looking at. So that's why I've asked the group if we can have this presentation. The chief has agreed to it. I'll formally ask Janet if you and Karen will allow for us to request this from the police department, but they are willing to go ahead and do so for our group, for our subcommittee.
Okay.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a lot for us to deal with. We've lost Richard off of the call. There are only 3 of us now that are left. We're missing 2 members. Do we want to continue going through this, or do we want to push this to our next meeting? How do we want to handle this?
Well, if we keep pushing these off, we're never gonna get it done. That's my opinion, but.
Yeah, yes, Janice.
I kind of think we should finish up with field stops, and then maybe we can meet another day during the week to discuss. I mean, if we want to do it right, we got to go through these in their entirety. And I don't think we're going to be able to go through each and every one of them in one sit down. So maybe we can do 2 today. We did body cam and field stops, and maybe we can make another date in the next couple of days where we can do another 2. But I don't really want to skip over parts that could be critical. So
okay,
I think if we can set up another date, maybe another evening, or because we're gonna have to do maybe 2 a session.
Okay, so I understand what you're saying. So why don't we try to complete our time looking at field stops, and then we could propose that we break these down and go through them on another day, and get through maybe 3 more at another session, or 2 more at another session, and then another session, another 2. Which would help us get through what we have. I just think that, just personally, I don't think that these are all the policies that we need to look at. I think that from even reading these policies, it made me recognize that there's so many things that they hinge on or don't hinge on. And an example of that would be just the body-worn cameras, that there's a policy that needs to be in place, if it isn't, that deals with all video used in the so that alone, there are things that we'll discover that need to be in place that are not in place, and then how do we make sure that they get addressed? So we can go through this list, but this isn't all that we're going to need to go through.
No, but I think what Janice says, that we've gone through 2 of them. I think we went through them pretty thoroughly. And maybe we could make another, date to do the next 2 or 3. Or,
I absolutely agree with. I agree with Janice about that. I absolutely agree with you, Janice.
So,
yes.
Janice, when is the next general meeting of the whole committee?
I believe it's November 16th, but I would say if Marie, Richard, Bernie, and I, Karen, if we are free another evening this week, because we have a lot of work to do. And I agree, Bernie, there's probably policies that we don't have in front of us that we're going to need to see, especially after you get that copy of the table of contents. So
Yes.
I think that's going to be important that we get that. But I think if we can find another evening this week, possibly, and then again on Sunday, if we could do 2 more one day this week, and then 2 more on Sunday, or 3 more, how many? I don't know how intense they are, but if we could do 2 to 3, but we should try to aim for another day this week.
Okay.
I know I have a meeting tomorrow, and I know I'm working the Board of Elections on Tuesday.
Right.
So
I'm going to say, Wednesday or Thursday night would be best, I think.
Wednesday works for me. Wednesday evening would work for me. I don't know about everyone else, but I think we should try to get another meeting in this week.
So I'm going to send a message to Karen to ask if we could have a meeting. And I'll send out a message to the committee to ask which day, Wednesday or Thursday evening, is best for our next meeting. In addition to the next Sunday, I'll ask Karen to set up 2 meeting sessions for us via Zoom, which one will be on either Wednesday or Thursday, and then the other one will be on Sunday again.
Okay,
Okay?
Right.
sounds good.
Good?
And then you're going to get the table of contents and send
I'm
it
gonna
out?
get the table of content, and I'm gonna put together a table that we can slot our issues or topics into as we go through these independently. And I'll send that out to everybody before the next meeting. A very
Okay.
simple table. It'll have 5 to 6 columns, and in each of those columns, it'll cover one, the policy, the paragraph of where that policy is, and the language that it's using, and then what we recommend the change should be, or our issue with that particular policy.
Got it.
Okay?
Okay.
And I'll send that out to everybody, and we can mark that up as we need to, and then use that further to identify and keep in mind all the things we're doing, instead of trying to make Marie remember everything that we've said.
Oh, I'm taking notes, don't worry.
I know that you are. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. Thank you.
All right, so we'll wait to hear from you, Bernie, to pick out our next date.
Okay.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Everybody have a good Sunday.
All right,
Thank you.
you
The
too,
same to you.
Janet. You
Okay,
too,
Bye-bye.
Bernie.
stay safe.
Bye-bye.